little bit more about me. I grew up in South Louisiana, south of a little town called Thibodaux. And so I grew up in 4-H and FFA, showing Brahman cattle there. And so when Jason talks about Texas being really the premier of youth livestock show projects, I can really attest to that. Growing up in Louisiana and showing cattle there, definitely in working here in Texas at the largest livestock show, it brings such a different perspective. When we talk about the idea of residue avoidance and things that happen, I mean, we really are on top of our game here in Texas, and that's something to definitely be proud of. And growing up in Louisiana really obviously shaped my career goals. I knew I wanted to come to this great school at a very, very early age. I think I was in the 7th grade, and we used to come to shows here. And we used to have a Brahman show here, and basically I would make my parents stop by A&M and get a couple of notebooks just so I could have them for high school. But coming to A&M, I love the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo. I interned there for about 4 years, and I've been going to that show since I was about 2 years old. Basically not exhibiting, but my dad exhibited Brahman cattle, so certainly it was a huge influence for me. My dad has told stories before. He used to work for a ranch in Florida. It was Sugarland Ranch, and he remembers taking cattle by train all the way from Florida to Houston. And so, you know, obviously I have a passion for the show and for youth livestock projects in general. I was thinking about it on the way over here, and I've been in stock show management for 10 years, and I can't really believe that because as my boss, Joel Calley, many of you know him, he says that for every year that you're working a livestock show, it ages you about 4, and I can't really disagree with that. But I've gained a lot of perspective and experience. I started off working at the Star Texas Fair and Rodeo, which obviously is a little bit smaller than Houston, but still one of the major shows. And then in 2007, I came to work for the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo, and certainly I've learned a lot. We have 27,000 entries, and we spend a lot of money on testing each year, a little bit around $40,000. And we're pretty much the show that tests the most, I can say, in the state and pretty much in the nation as well, if you look at numbers across the board. And that's how important that we think it is. And so I was excited when Dr. Clear asked me to come and speak to you guys today. We have an opportunity to communicate to you as well as maybe through our exhibitors as to what our standards are, what we do test for, how we test, that sort of thing. But it also will hopefully make you realize the impact that you can have on an exhibitor's career, especially if you're helping them to make a decision right before the show. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and get into my presentation. Okay, so why do we test? 2 main reasons. Any major livestock show will tell you. The first is to protect the safety of the food supply chain. And I know that you all know that, but if you stop for a second and take a look at how many major shows, major terminal shows there are in the state of Texas, how many county terminal shows there are in the state of Texas, that's a whole lot of product going back into the market for consumption. And so it's our responsibility to make sure that we're doing all we can to make it safe. And so that's the first reason. The next is to foster fair competition. We want to make sure that our show is as much on a fair and level playing field as it possibly can be, so that our winners don't have a competitive advantage over somebody else. And so those are the 2 big reasons that we test. So when we talk about drug rules, and I'll tell you there, and Dr. Ferries will tell you, there are a lot of similarities across the major shows as far as drug rules. But we have about 3 pages that outline our entire policy on residue avoidance. I've highlighted a couple of things that hopefully maybe you can take home with you today. But unapproved drug use basically is prohibited. We even go so far in our rules to state that if an animal's been administered during its lifetime any quantity of unapproved drug, that is prohibited. And so that part's pretty clear. The approved drug use is a little bit different. Obviously, if it's approved, it has to be approved for that species, and it has to have sufficient time to pass to pass through that animal system so that it doesn't test positive. So that means it must be completely eliminated from that animal system. And we're going to get into a little bit more about what that means from our standpoint versus withdrawal times here on the next slide. Okay, so the first big one is that HLSR maintains a zero tolerance policy. And I know this is a little bit of a point of contention with some of you all, because you might be saying, well, zero tolerance, that's above and beyond anything that FDA requires. And yes, this is true. And I can tell you for the past 5 years, we have tried to send out a letter. Maybe some of you have received it, but just to try to make our veterinarians across the state aware that our show rules are a little bit more stringent than what FDA requires. So when we're telling our exhibitors just to go ahead and follow the withdrawal times, that's not exactly good enough, even on approved substances. And I can tell you that the main reason that this exists is because we can't really make a decision on an amount that's found in a substance. If we say, we allow 0.5 nanograms, well, then that's okay. It's very hard for us to say we allow, just a tiny bit. We have to say we don't allow anything. One good example of that is dexamethasone with zero withdrawal. So if we said, if you just follow the withdrawal on that drug, you come here and you test positive for it at Houston, well, potentially it could be a competitive advantage. That's not going to be allowed for us. And so you can't say just follow FDA guidelines, just follow the label. You have to go above and beyond that. And as Dr. Ferries has preached to us a whole bunch, basically, if you'll triple that withdrawal time or have that in your mind to triple that, not just double, but triple, I think he even may say go as far as 6 times, 6 times on that withdrawal period, then you're going to be safe, because our rules clearly read, must be free and clear upon arrival to showground. So that doesn't mean the day that they're tested, that means the day that they get here. So if you're showing a market steer, you get here on Monday, really you're not tested on Friday. But we want to give our exhibitors enough of a window of time to make sure that it's completely eliminated. Which basically leads to the next point, the difference between withdrawal and elimination period. That withdrawal time is what FDA says that can be allowed in the animal system so that it's safe for consumption. Elimination period is zero traces in that animal system. And so there's a big difference, and this right here is pretty much where a lot of our confusion comes in, and pretty much where we talk to a lot of our exhibitors that do have positive cases, because there is not an understanding between the difference of those two. And it will help a lot, because I can tell you that, even in San Antonio, Fort Worth, all the majors that do drug testing, they have a zero tolerance policy as well. And so the understanding of this is really critical so that we can try to minimize some of our positive cases. And you'll see in a second, we don't really have a lot of positive cases compared to what we test. But the ones that we do, we really want to try to minimize and prevent. And so that's where it comes in when you've got an exhibitor that's calling. It may have a lame animal or one that needs treatment right away. It's important to really ask them where they're going, what show they're going to. Ultimately, it's their responsibility as an exhibitor or as a parent. But you are also the professional here that's helping them to make an informed decision. So what do we test for? We go through Texas Veterinarian Medical Diagnostic Lab, and I can tell you that it's a broad spectrum test. When someone calls our office and asks for a list of what to test for, we don't have it, and neither do other major shows. Now, if they're going to call and say, I'm about to give this, can you advise us and help us? Then yeah, we'll certainly do that. But the reason why we don't print a list in our handbook, our premium books, or any other communication tools that we use is basically because something can change. People are getting creative all the time. Every year we find new things that maybe we need to be looking for or testing for. And so for us to really designate what we test for, it is not really a feasible thing. It's not something that we want to do. We let the labs take care of that, and then they report to us what they find. But our three main classes of drugs, anti-inflammatory, so Dex, Bute, things like that. Beta agonists, those are the hot topics. That's going to be the class of drug that'll get you in the most trouble at any show. And at Houston, with regard to our penalties, we pretty much will stage a penalty based on the severity of a drug. And so this obviously would be the most severe one. So your clenbuterols, zilpaterol, and any unapproved animal as well. Antibiotics and bacterials, sulfa is the main one that we see there. So. Okay, just to give you an idea of how much we test, kind of broke it down by species. On the market barrows, it's first place barrows and any second place that's going to jump up to a reserve breed champion. We also do 2 randoms per breed. On the market steers, it's first and second placing steers in each class, 2 randoms per breed. On the lambs and goats, it's the same, first and second, and 2 randoms per class. And we also do some tissue testing on the lambs and goats. On the broilers, 1st through 10th place. On the turkeys, 1st through 12th. And then breeding heifers are the only breeding animals that we test. Currently, we don't test gilts or breeding sheep, but we'll do breed champions and reserve breed champions on the breeding heifers. And when I say that we test the most, we have a total of 430 samples, which equates to about 23% of the animals that are making our auctions. So that's a pretty high number. And I can tell you that on average, the 6 years that I've been at Houston, our positives have been less than 3% of that number. So that's really good. I mean, we're making a lot of progress. I think a lot of people in here can attest to that. But you have to do this. You have to do it to keep the integrity of your show going. And we get a lot of calls from county agents, from other smaller shows as well, as to how we test, what we do, our protocols that we use. And so we're out there advising a lot of people. And as I mentioned before, we have a huge investment in this, but we think it's completely worth it. So just to give you an idea of our testing procedures, many of you have probably been involved at some point or another, but we're very blessed in Houston. We have 28,000 volunteers, which is a lot sometimes, but we've got about 70 of those on our veterinarian committee. And so half of those are practicing vets, the other half are vet techs. So we're fortunate in that. I really believe that having them administer the testing procedures just adds a whole nother level of professionalism for us from a show standpoint. And so we have a lot of confidence in our program. But a couple of the steps that we use, many of you have seen our testing areas, but the designated exhibitor is going to be escorted from either the cattle arena or the lamb, goat, and pig arena immediately after they've placed and they're out of contention. They're going to be escorted to the designated area. And something that we do at Houston is we're really pretty transparent as far as testing goes. We don't want to hide what we're doing. We feel like what we're doing is right. And as long as we've got our standard operating procedures in place and everything's going well, then we don't mind showing people what we're doing. So our testing area for cattle is right behind the main cattle arena. And then our testing area for lambs, goats, and pigs is going to be directly west in some pens west of our show arena. And so people can actually walk up and see what's going on. I mean, not directly in the pen. Our protocols are a little bit tighter than that, but they can see what's going on from a distance. And so that animal is that designated exhibitor and animal are escorted by one of our officials to the area. We have to have a responsible adult with that exhibitor the entire time. So all the way through the testing until testing is completed. Basically, any feed or water that is given or administered to the animal, we do allow that, but it has to be administered by the teacher or exhibitor or the parent or guardian. No abusive behavior, obviously, no choking, smothering, nothing like that. That's a really bad perception from an animal welfare standpoint, and those are the things that we try very hard to avoid and try to make sure that we have a handle on. After the urine is collected, the samples are split. Again, the exhibitor is witnessing all of this, so it's a bit of an education for him as well. But because they're witnessing it, if we ever have to go back, if they can test something, we've got everything properly labeled and in the right form to make sure that they were a part of the whole process. So we'll split the sample, and the vet that's collecting it will make sure that both samples are sealed. We'll get the sample, then we'll split it. And then basically we'll definitely secure the sample. We've got evidence tape. We make the exhibitor initial the top of it, and then we make the vet that collected the urine sample initial the side as well as the exhibitor kind of right along the tape. So that way, if anything has happened to the sample when it gets to TAM in College Station, we know it's been tampered with. If the two initials are still intact, well then that means that the sample has been shipped and everything was fine. And so next, the exhibitor will then sign this form that we have basically, and these samples are anonymous. We go ahead and number them, so that way we as a show are the only ones that know who this sample belongs to. The only thing that Dr. Garland sees and her staff sees is a number along with the other information. So it's a very confidential process. We try to maintain utmost confidentiality through it all. And then basically after these samples are sealed, they're put into two separate lock boxes, either put in a secure place overnight or they're delivered directly to College Station here the next day. So I guess from your perspective, I know that you're working with a lot of exhibitors mainly around showtime. What do you do if an animal gets sick leading up to the show? I guess from our standpoint, we just would like to communicate that it is the exhibitor's responsibility to know the show rules, whatever show they're going to, it doesn't matter. They sign off an indemnity, they sign off an entry card. In our case, it has to be notarized that they have read, they understand, and will abide by all show rules. And so we take it pretty seriously. After the fact, it's a little too late when we're talking to some people and they're saying, well, we didn't read that. But it's definitely critical that they understand that. And if you can maybe help us to enforce that would really help as well. Because timing is of the essence. I mean, if they're going to San Antonio and it's a week away, then obviously you've got some concerns about administering anything. But this next bullet point, again, is just reiterating that they understand the difference between elimination period and withdrawal period. Double it, if not triple it, if it's an approved substance, just to be sure that it's completely eliminated from that animal system. And I know that that's a hard decision a lot of times. I mean, we talk to a lot of people, and sometimes they've got to stay home because of a decision that they've made, and they don't want to take a chance on testing positive. But I would rather them make an informed decision. I would rather you help them to make an informed decision than to make a decision that may really get them into some trouble that they may regret down the road. And so just to give you an idea, as I mentioned before, at Houston we're pretty transparent. We believe in communication to our exhibitors, and this topic of Zilmax, Zilpaterol, Zilrator, whatever you want to call it, has certainly been in the headlines quite a bit over the last 6-7 months. At this point, you can't hardly read that, but we actually just sent an e-blast to all of our exhibitors, posted this on our Facebook, and let me back up a little before I explain what our stance is right now. When Zilmax was approved for market steers and feedlot steers, Dr. Ferry's has it been 3 years, I believe? Okay, so we got a lot of questions at that point. You know, what are you going to do as a show with Zilmax? Can we feed it? Can we not? We came out for the last 3 years and said that it's okay for you to feed it. We're not going to be testing for it in the urine. because it's approved for feedlot steers, it's approved for market steers, and it's also readily available for everybody. Anybody could buy it from Sullivan's or whoever was distributing it. No other show really did that. No other show really addressed it, but we came out and said it's fair because we wanted to make sure that those kids that were wondering if they could feed it or not knew that they could, and that those other kids didn't have a competitive advantage over those that said, we're going to play by the rules just in case they're testing for it. So basically what we had to do, what we wanted to do this year, is come out and make another statement because of the situation, the timing, and the circumstances of this product right now, and the decision that Merck has made to suspend it. We are saying that Zilpaterol or Zilmax cannot be found in the urine. And when you look at that, it's really no different than any other show. We're saying it cannot be in the urine. Make sure it's free, those animals are free and clear when they get here. But it has caused, not that it's caused a little bit of confusion, it's just a little bit different because other shows maybe have not come out and said that. But we want to make sure that our exhibitors know that we're testing for it this year. And that's because of the research that's being done on the product. From an animal welfare standpoint, we don't know if it's going to be returning back on the market at this point for show cattle, and so we're testing for it. And then if you look down at the next couple of paragraphs, we do have a zero tolerance policy. We have an exception to that, and every other show does too, but we come out and say it so that it's fair. So basically, we're not testing for Paline and Barrows. We're not testing for Optiflex and steers and Top Max and turkeys. And so we say that so that it's clear that everybody can use it. And then at the bottom there, we address questions regarding our breeding animals, that basically we're not testing for any antibiotics or antibacterials in breeding animals because they're not going to slaughter. And so, again, we do our best to try to communicate with our exhibitors so they can make the best decision. This last slide I have here, I know it's really exciting reading for everyone. But this is found on our indemnification form, which every single exhibitor has to sign. The parent signs it, the ag teacher or the county agent signs it, and it also has to be notarized. And it's very small print, basically states our residue avoidance rules. We don't allow or tolerate any unapproved drugs. All approved drugs have to meet the elimination period as well, and it addresses our emergency treatment plan. So basically, what we do at Houston is if an animal needs to be treated on site, we do allow an exhibitor to bring in their own veterinarian, but we have to know about that, and so they first got to contact our show veterinarian. 99% of exhibitors will just use our show vet that we have on site. But here again, and that's actually way better for them because she's fully aware of our show rules and can help them to make a decision on that. But it is up to the exhibitor as to what they want to do, and it's their responsibility at the end of the day. And so this pretty much says, I have read, I fully understand, and will abide by all of these rules. And so again, it's their exhibitor, or it's their responsibility as an exhibitor, but it's our responsibility to try to help to educate them and try to help them to make an informed decision, because I'll tell you that a lot of our show rules, as I mentioned before, are so similar, and a lot of these positive cases, so many of them could just be prevented with a little bit more education. So our appeals process, so we have a pretty we have a great process. I've been at, as I mentioned, 2 different shows, and I'm proud of the way that we handle this process. But when we do have a positive that comes in, as I mentioned before, our responsibility is to keep everything as confidential as possible. We don't notify the ag teacher, we don't notify the county agent in writing. We notify the exhibitor and their family. And then we give them a little bit of time. We notify them of the consequence or of the infraction, basically. We then meet as a committee in advance, and we say, we think because of this infraction, this person should get this type of ban. And so we then communicate that back to the exhibitor and the parent in written communication. And we also say if you would like to schedule a hearing to come in and tell us about your situation, please do so. And so we give those kids an opportunity to come in and tell us what happened, even if they can't think of anything, even if they just come in and say, I have no idea. It really gives us an opportunity to engage, I guess, the compassion of the family, the intent of the family, and especially if they say yes. Some of them will reply in writing, and that's good, but it's hard to really understand where they're coming from if they're not going to take the time to come and meet with us in person. And so if they do take us up on that hearing in person, we have a great committee. We have Dr. Ferries, we have our legal counsel, myself, it's our show president now, and then we've also got a couple other volunteers that are attorneys that sit on that board with us. And it's really enlightening to hear some of the cases that we have, and especially if they take you up on it. And depending on what it is, Dr. Ferries is a great detective. He really is. He can get an answer out of anyone, but we try very hard to figure out the situation. So we'll ask questions like, who did you haul with? Where did you stall? What did you feed your animal? Do you have any other show animals? Just to try to figure out where they may have obtained this positive substance from, whatever it is. And a lot of times we can come to a conclusion that we agree upon. And some may say, well, that adds a level of subjectivity to it where it's not just black and white. At other shows, if you have a positive, many other shows, if you have a positive, it's a positive. And there are some pretty severe consequences to that. With us, the reason why I'm so proud of it is because we do take a chance to listen to those families because of the investment that they have within those projects, and to really hear them out and to make a decision, an educated decision on what really happened, which then in turn can affect their penalty, basically reduce it. We don't go any higher, or we could if they make us really mad, right, Dr. Ferries? But no, 99% of the time, if anything, we'll come off of a penalty after an appeals process if the committee feels like that's the thing to do. And so here again, whatever we decide after that appeals, the exhibitor has the opportunity to appeal that decision to the executive committee, and that is the final ruling. And we don't really have so many of those because of the way that we handle the appeals process. And so either, if an exhibitor is in there and maybe doesn't come out with what they want, they understand why we have to make this ruling. Or they might have gotten a little bit lesser of a penalty, which means a lot to them. It really does. So communicate, but basically double, triple it. We have to draw the line at 0, and maybe Dr. Garland can attest to her levels. I don't want to get her into that, but a lot of that was determined when we first started drug testing. I'm sure there were some standards as to what is positive, what's not, but for our purpose, we can't say, it's okay to have 1 nanogram or a half a nanogram. And so whatever she tells us isn't, if it's a positive, it's a positive. So that's why, we do want to inform our exhibitors. If you look at our stats, less than 3% out of 420, that's pretty good. So a lot of people are catching on at that and doing that. But at the same time, I would also say if you're in that situation, you may have the exhibitor call the show. And, no, we may not have the perfect answer, but we can talk to Dr. Garland and maybe advise them on what to do. Yes, treat it. You'll be fine. Or no, I'm sorry. If you're going to treat it, then you'll take your chances of testing here. Okay, the question was, were our positive cases public record? And the answer is no, they are not public record. We make every effort to protect the integrity of these kids, the families. We are very concerned about defamation of character with the kids because of the situation. Every situation is different. And so I can't tell you that every show treats it like that, but at Houston, no, we definitely do not make that public record.